The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
To Triversity Talk. I hope everybody's having a really good week. And my gosh, today is Valentine's Day. First of all, happy Valentine's Day. If you're celebrating it with your significant other, or if you're celebrating it with friends, or if you're celebrating it with your pets, it's really a great holiday to just kick back, put on something that's got red in it, and say to whoever you meet, happy Valentine's Day. So we have just finished up in New York City Fashion Week. And I have to give a shout out here to the amazing designer, Ricardo from Chulo Underwear brand, which you can find on Instagram. I love his company for a multitude of reasons. First of all, as he says, if you feel good, you look good in Chulo Underwear brand. And his models really run the gamut of all shapes and sizes, but they're all just such beautiful people. And I love what Ricardo does because every single thing he does gives back to the community. And, you know, there's a lot of companies out there that make incredible profits, but Ricardo's been doing this and it's all been for the community. So make sure you check out Chulo Underwear brand on Instagram. And tonight's guest, I wanted to have somebody really special on tonight. And maybe you've noticed lately, I've been traveling to other places. I had someone on that was a writer from Israel a few weeks ago. And well, tonight we went all the way to Mexico. How about that? That's the beauty of streaming. And you're going to love my guest tonight because, you know, we're talking about giving back to community. She certainly is a really great example of somebody that gives back to community. Well known in the ballroom scene as Isis Magdalena, and her other name, Angie Tapia. I probably messed that up. I'm not good with pronunciation, but she's a leader of the ballroom scene in Mexico. But what was so incredible to me is, besides being the founder of the House of Magdalena, she's been working with LGBTQ plus community against serophobia, transphobia, racism, and she's collaborated with like-minded organizations and collectives. And a shout out here, she came to us through the Zero Project, which is just absolutely amazing, the work that they do. So please welcome Isis Magdalena.
Hello, Wendy. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm so glad to be here today. Happy Valentine's.
Well, thank you so much. Now, this is a crazy question. I would assume you celebrate Valentine's Day in Mexico, right?
Right, we do. We do celebrate a lot. We are very loving people. We're always in love. So, of course, and we are very friendly. So, of course, we celebrate that important date. It's very important for us.
It's very important all over. And like here, you know, in the States, it's become very, very commercial. First of all, like 2 months ago, you were seeing advertising for Valentine's in all the stores. Do they do that in Mexico as well?
Yeah, I just walked in from the gym and everybody around was like it was all hearts, and I really love it. I'm a romantic, so I love that everywhere is packed of like hearts, and obviously the brands take advantage of that, especially. But as long as we keep it romantic and loving, that's perfect.
You know what? I totally already love where you're coming from. I totally agree. So you currently, I know you work and collaborate with a number of organizations. You work with the Zero Project. Can you
I
tell us?
currently,
Yeah,
sorry.
tell us a little bit about what you're doing with them.
Of course, I currently work as coordinator for Latin America and the Caribbean for the Zero Project. I collaborate with other organizations, but my main work is with the Zero Project against criminalization of us people living with HIV.
Wow. And you said Latin America, so that's like a huge representation.
Right. Yeah. So we do work for other countries. We hope that someday we have a specific team for each part of Latin America. But for now, it's my job to keep the network in Latin America together and connected. So that's part of what I do. Take advantage of these amazing tools like the internet to keep communicated with the other countries in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Which, it is really exciting that you can be in Mexico, where you told me it's hot, 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 and I'm here in New York, and I am freezing my tatas off. But we're able, right? We're able to get the word out about all this great stuff that's going on. Now, in terms of the Zero Project and their fight against HIV criminalization, what is the situation in Latin America countries as far as that goes?
Currently, most of the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean don't have laws. Like most of them
They
have
don't
laws that criminalize. They do have laws that criminalize people living with HIV. I
have,
was
okay,
gonna say that they don't have laws that protect people living with HIV. So it's the
right.
other way around. It's especially in the Caribbean. It's a very few countries or cities. For example, in my country, Mexico, only 4 states recently in Mexico City, that is where I live, is the capital. It was derogated, Article 159, that criminalized people living with HIV here in Mexico. And that was the fourth states out of, I think it's 32 states that we have here, that the others still criminalize people living with HIV here in Mexico. So there's still a lot to do, but it was a huge step at the capital, that it's always one of the first to make the steps in progress for human rights.
Human rights, yeah.
So other countries like Argentina have a couple of years already with a law that protects people living with HIV. So it's most of the countries here in Latin America that don't have laws that protect us. The other way around, they have a lot of laws that criminalize us.
That criminalize and work against you. And you mentioned the Caribbean in particular, the laws are against.
Right. Most of the countries in the Caribbean have laws that criminalize people living with HIV.
So
That's where we're focusing on mostly this year.
So I'm going to ask you a question, coming from somebody that grew up in the United States. I've traveled everywhere and I've worked in other countries, but I'm very aware of culture and cultural differences, right? In terms of Latin America and the Caribbean, and in terms of changing the mindset, right? We want to change the mindset. How much is connected to the culture? And whenever we think of Latin America, right? It's a machismo, as we say it, culture, right? How much of criminalization do you think is connected to that?
All of it. Actually, that's very important that you mentioned. I think it's because we are mostly very religious countries,
Yeah.
Catholic and Christian, that it's a very close-minded society. You can imagine if cis woman is already being like mistreated just for being a woman, another person that doesn't have that is gender non-conforming or transgender, and you can put a plus on that if it's someone that lives with HIV. It's totally treated as a third level person, if that's
Right.
something correct to say. So it totally has everything to do with misogyny, machismo, homophobia, transphobia, classism, racism. So it's very important that we connect all of those dots when we fight against phobia for HIV or criminalization for HIV, that we know where it comes from, so we know how to end it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so impressed by what you're doing, and we're talking about. I forgot about the religious, right? It's These are Catholic countries, so you're dealing with that as well as everything else. You certainly, as we say, have a lot on your plate in dealing with this. How do you go about trying to change this kind of mindset? Right, we're in 2024. All right. In I was about to say in the United States, as you know, we have marriage equality and things were a lot more open. Notice I say they were a lot more open because, as you know, a lot of that's changed and a lot will be determined by the election going forward, right? So, how do you think you personally want to reach people?
I would say the first thing to do, it would be going through education since an early age, that people, children know in their education that HIV is not a bad thing, that people with HIV, we are normal people, that we just live, work, and go every day to live life. That would be very good if children would know that about, you know, treatment, prevention, sexual education, because all of these taboos that are covered by all of these like religion, like, you know,
Right.
mindset that we have behind, and that we have very um, part of a culture, like you said. That would be the first thing to do, and then if it was, yeah, that would be perfect. But that's something that it's not happening, at least not here. In Mexico City, it was already proposed to have that kind of education for children since an early age. And of course, there was a lot of backlash from these conservative
That was
parties.
you just read my mind, Andy. That's where I was going next because I was going to. We have backlash here like crazy. So it never happened in Mexico City.
Yes, of course, we have it all the time. So Mexico City is basically leftist city. It's always been progressive, and everything that starts here after goes to other places in Mexico. Because if you come to Mexico City, you'll see, especially because you're from New York, you'll see that here there's a lot of like diversity because everyone from the country comes here too, so they can be
Oh yeah,
free.
I've been to Mexico City. You have great
Okay,
clubs
great,
and you have a really great zoo too.
right, that's
I
beautiful
love
too. Yeah,
clubs and animals. But
yeah,
yeah, when I think of Mexico City, I think of it as progressive, right? But
yeah.
in our talk, Mexico City is such a small area compared to like dealing with Latin America
Of
and
course.
dealing with the Caribbean. I for one up here, I've got a lot of friends from the Caribbean, that migrate up to New York. Very popular to come here. And the stories they tell me from countries like Jamaica, which that's a big tourist place for all of us to travel to, but in terms of the acceptance there, you're not safe. You're just not safe.
You're not safe as LGBTIQ plus person, and you're not safe as an HIV positive person. That's one of the countries that criminalize HIV in Latin America and the Caribbean. So it's really sad that such a beautiful country that if they have
Is
amazing people, they're not safe for people like us, and so it's basically dangerous to live there and to be yourself there. So it's such a sad story about Jamaica. Yeah.
well, well, it's a very complicated issue. I want to get on to also being HIV positive. How easy is it, getting the drugs here, or what we used to call the cocktails, which are now the HIV drugs. I was I was going through it when they invented the cocktails. Okay, invented. I mean, that was really trial and error. And I have lots of friends that survived the 80s that are now, we're in 2024, and they're just living their best lives. They have a zero viral load. But what is it like for people in Latin America? Are the drugs easily accessible?
They're not everywhere. For example, here in Mexico City, we have privilege about the access for HIV meds. For example, I've never had a problem getting my meds here.
You can't.
And thank
Okay,
God.
great.
But you go a little bit, a couple hours to another state in Mexico, and it's never the same story. And it's always here, people from here helping and sending meds. Like Alain Pinson, that it's one of the best activists here in Mexico, like really helping people to get their meds from another states. Like he sends them their meds, and it's an amazing work because it's really hard. And there's a lot of countries that have that same situation, and it goes worse if you go outside the capitals of the countries and you go to the actual places where
you can't
where
get
they need it the
medications
most.
that are easily taken and life-saving. I mean, we're not just talking about quality of life. We're talking, I have friends that have had HIV for 40 years. It's a really long time. And they're just, it's a totally normal life. But what you're describing is people that can't get those drugs, and they'll get very sick, and a lot of them will pass. And that makes me very sad, because this is really, it's accessible, right? Who is the name of the activist? You just mentioned someone. Say it loudly and slowly, because I want to hear it.
Alain, like Alan, but with an I between the A and the N. Alain Pinson, like Pinzon. And he has an amazing organization called Viva Libre, Live Free. That's what it's called in English. And he does like the field work of going, getting the meds, and sending them, getting donations from people that don't use their meds, or people that die. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I admire him so much.
And is this you've worked with this person?
Of course, I'm constantly sending people that comes to me for because they see that I'm in the HIV field, and they want to, like, basically he gets like, if you need mental health because of HIV, or you need like a specialist for any issue that you have with HIV, he has all the connections here in Mexico City. So yeah, it's amazing.
Wow, what an incredible person. And see, if I didn't have you on from Mexico and we weren't having this conversation, we all know so many people that are doing incredible things. But I have people come on the show from other places, and they tell me about something really special, and I've never heard of that person. So bless them for all the great work that they're doing, right? So I guess along the same lines, what is the acceptance of transitioning in Latin America?
So Mexico is the second country in the world with the most transgender murders and violence. So we're not doing here, like, it was just January, we already had 6 cases that we know that were like public about transgender violence. So it's not easy. Here in Mexico, for example, also the access for the meds for transitioning, like hormone treatment.
Yeah,
it's easy, but anywhere else outside, or in other places in Latin America, it's not even legal. So acceptance in, like, very Catholic or Christian countries is really hard, especially because they're machistas. Imagine if they already like have all this hate for cisgender women, and then also they have like this homophobia, and so it's like an accumulation of all the hate that comes to transgender people. So is not easy at all. We just had the first like really famous transgender woman representing in very important, the most watched show in Mexico last year. So that wasn't a little advanced because she actually won the reality show. Her name is Wendy Guevara.
And say her name again. And what is the name of the show that she won?
She's just like your name, Wendy, and her last name is Guevara. And it's a House of the Famous. That's what it's called, the show. And she was, for a lot of people, she was the first transgender woman that they ever saw. And it was there was a lot of children that had the first transgender person, and they heard them talk, and they noticed that she was just a regular person. So it was, and she has a lot of charisma. So I think that was a great step for transgender community here in Mexico. So in general, in the Caribbean, it's really dangerous to be transgender.
Yeah.
For example, there are countries like Argentina that have a lot of like main actress or TV hosts that are transgender, and they have way better laws for transgender people in general. So
it's interesting though, because Argentina, I always felt very sophisticated, very much like New York, very European in feeling, right? But and it makes me happy that you're saying they have TV hosts that are transgender and everyone is okay with it. But the new government that they put in is extremely right wing, and I've, again, of course, had friends from Argentina, and we talk about this. I am really curious about going forward, how safe it will be for people, that are transgender.
Right. The thing is that you feel that you took such amazing steps like they did. They have amazing advocates in Argentina.
That's great.
That they lived in this, like, it seemed almost like a totally separated country in terms of like human rights of Latin America.
Right.
And suddenly they come back to, like, after a lot of years of having leftist government, they go back to having this like fascist governor. It's so sad, and I only wish that they don't let him do everything he wants to do, because he really wants to take back all the steps that they already gave. And it's so sad that they are going through this situation when they are an example for all countries in Latin America in terms of advocacy for HIV and transgender and human rights in general.
Right. But, even here in the States now, things are up for grabs. The amount of states that wanted to make it impossible for transgender people to get their drugs, right? That is, right. I compare that to denying insulin to a diabetic. It's just like the same thing. This is something that someone needs to live their life, and I still cannot wrap my head around how one human being could do that to another. It's awful. It really, really is awful. And that's something we're dealing with here. And as you know, here, the amount of on the Transgender Day of Remembrance, the amount of names that we end up reading get longer and longer and longer and longer. You would hope that the world would realize, right? We all need to be on equal footing, and people should be allowed to live their lives the way they want. And it's interesting here in the States, because I came to New York in my 20s, Andy, when you weren't even on the earth. And, I met a number of trans people in the theatrical world, and it was just like a completely accepted thing. And then, like, now more and more and more and more people are transitioning, and the amount of people I know over 50 transitioning, and that's tough. That's very tough, because you have your whole life that was one way, right? And then, like, at an older age, you're changing everything. You're absolutely changing everything. Some partners stay together, some don't,
Right.
Some of the kids are accepting of the parent that transitions. Some kids aren't, you know. So you have that whole thing happening here. And you know, you just think about going forward, we hope that the everyone in the world will just start to accept everybody else. I mean, come on. Everyone should be allowed to live their truth, as we say.
Of course. Yeah, I started my transition when I was 34 last year. I'm in my hormone transition. And it was, at the beginning, I was like, there's like 8 years before that I was like openly transgender. But I was like, why should I do hormones? Like, that was not my thing. And at a moment, I was like, I think I really want to do it. And then I was like, but I'm 34. Am I like too old for this? Because of all of these ideas. And I have a lot of transgender friends that start like at a really young age.
Right.
But when I went to the first, like, there was like an auditorium and there was a lot of people that was coming to get information about transition. And we were feeling like this list so we can get information, and we needed to put our age right next to our email, and everybody was 30, 40, 50,
That
a lot of people transitioning.
Right. That
Yeah.
Look at that. That's the whole point. You know, things have gotten more fluid that way, and people should be able to. You brought out a good point. You know, you had transitioned in terms of your visual and your dress, but you weren't taking hormones yet. You know, the
Right.
other thing. I know, you know, there's someone who is on this show, Julie Gray Owens, who, and I always have to quote her because when she talks about transitioning, she's a trans woman and she runs an amazing group in Long Island and she's done so much. But when she talks about transitioning, she talks about it like a train ride. And the only train, you know, Long Island here in the States, right? We have the Long Island Railroad and there's all these towns along the way. And what she said was so true. You know, you can get out at Huntington, Long Island, right? That's halfway on the Long Island Railroad, or you can go all the way to Montauk. And that's about as far away as you can get. And that is a really great way to look at it. I can tell you, like 10 years ago, in the trans community, people would often be judgmental of people that didn't do the whole thing, whatever the whole thing was, you know, or the surgery.
Right. They don't get that it's also transphobia. That's called transmedicalism. That's when
Tell me what it is again. I want to hear that word.
Transmedicalism.
Okay.
So it's basically when another person in the trans community or anyone says that you're not trans if you don't go through hormone treatment or surgery, and you can just be a woman without like having to go through this process. That's like actually going against what we use as an argument ourselves, because we say that we are born this way. Right. Because I know that I was born this way. So then how I would need that to prove that I am this, right? So yeah, I only did it because that makes me happy. But if anyone decides that that's not something that they need to do, that's perfect.
You know, I have a really good trans friend who's been on the show. She's like my best girlfriend that I love going out with. And you know, we've discussed this because you know what, she doesn't do hormones. She's not doing surgery. No desire ever, and never had that, but completely for years and years has embraced who she is, her whole feminine aspect. And I know a number of people like that, and nobody should be judging anyone else. My God, everybody should be on the same side here, you know?
Right. Like, especially I grew up with a very strong woman. Sometimes they're feminine, sometimes they're not. So I'm like, I love going to the gym. I love being strong and muscular.
Yeah.
Like, usually society. Oh, awesome. Let's go together when I go to New York. We should work out. So basically, I think that there's like this amazing diversity, like every like diversity in women is huge. Like you can be strong, you can be whatever you want, all types of bodies, personalities. So I think that's what's beautiful about the world, that everybody's different and that should be
Right.
celebrated. Yeah,
Right. And they should
just
be
like in.
allowed to
Mhm.
celebrate their differences, and people need to be tolerant of everybody else. Which brings me to a key question that I did really want to ask you. How do you think having your own house, how do you think being a ballroom star can affect how people will perceive people that are trans, gender fluid, homosexual, whatever terminology you want to use? How can you use your celebrity that way?
You were great to bring this up right now because, as I told you, differences makes it special, and that's what makes Ballroom Community
Right.
an amazing place to be yourself, because there what we celebrate is our differences. And so I think that being a person that has been in the Ballroom Community here in Mexico for 8 years.
Wow,
um,
8 years. And I have to ask, is it so, we have a huge ballroom community in New York City and over in Jersey as well. What is the ballroom community like in Mexico City?
So it's still a very young community. I think it's 9 years now that it has been around here in Mexico. Mexico City, now we have ballroom all around the country, but it's
Great.
very unique. Yeah, it's very unique. You see a lot of diversity of skin tones because we are a very diverse community here. We also have a very different type of categories that differentiates us from the United States. Usually, for example, the 6 iron category there is more about celebrating the very masculine body, like strong gym type of body, and here
Body, we call
uh,
it.
yeah, and here it's celebrating any type of body, like really fat bodies and like, like all types of bodies. I think it's super, super diverse and dense. Like you really have people from all ages, which I love, because as a young community, you have people that it's starting like in their 50s to come to the Ballroom community and be a part of it, which I think is amazing that we are not like stopping uh, by age, we're not stopping by gender, we're not stopping by anything. Here is like really celebrating that we're not perfect because we have our issues like any community, but
Of course.
we try to keep it safe. We try to keep it safe for people to come and be themselves at the balls or at the classes.
You know what? I think that that's great. And you said you yourself started becoming a part of the ballroom community 8 years ago.
Right, yeah. And I was the first HIV positive that person that was open about it in the ballroom community, which inspired a lot of people
Right.
from my community. I think right now, since last time we asked, almost 60 to 70% of the community is HIV positive. So that's a perfect place where I can like find out the needs of the community, the HIV community through Ballroom, and to get close to the community that really needs it. Also, I work with non-white people here in Mexico, transgender people. So I'm the most close to the community I really need to be working with through Ballroom, and that's also Ballroom is my life. So
Right.
that's where it took me to where I am now, working for my community and for the people that really needs it the most.
Well, I that's what I meant when I said using your celebrity to be able to reach people. Absolutely brilliant. They trust you, they know you, they will listen to you, and you can certainly help people that way, which is, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, that we have community and we all support each other. And now, have
Yeah.
you traveled for conferences. You've been in Montreal, right?
I was 2 years ago in Montreal for the AIDS conference. I was part of this pre-conference that it was called for Fox X Summit, organized by Impact Global. And
I love the name of it. I have a friend that always says that, for fuck's sake. And
yeah, I love the name too.
that is such a great name for it. Can you give me some details about what the first, or I can't even say it, for fuck's Summit was about?
For Fox X Summit is basically about bringing the tools for people already living with HIV so they can have freedom in their sexuality and they're not afraid to share. It's bringing HIV positive people together to also create a network through our positiveness. So that was beautiful because once you're in a room full of people living with HIV, the whole vibe changes. You won't feel judged. So that was beautiful. The thing that I talked about at that conference was sex as a currency and image.
I was going to ask you, I'm not familiar with that term. What is sexual currency?
So it's basically the term of that sex can be taken as currency for everything. Everybody uses their the way they look for exchanging. So
Wow.
it sounds very superficial, but if you go deeper, it's like, you don't only talk about specifically sex work, but everybody does it through their life. So
Currency.
that and how HIV crosses and affects your body image and your personality. So what I do, for example, when I visit other places in Mexico to give classes, because my category is sex siren, it's about empowering yourself through sensuality, especially if you're living with HIV, because you go through this process after you get your, you know that you're HIV positive, and you feel like your body is, not worth it anymore.
Well,
All
yeah,
of these like negative thoughts.
depending, right. It's demoralizing. Okay. Getting that status is demoralizing and it messes with your head.
Right. So basically, you tell people living with HIV that we are very much worthy of love,
Worthy.
passion, and sex, and all of that. Still living with HIV, we can enjoy our sexuality, and that you can still be a powerful and sexual person after getting your HIV positive diagnosis. Yeah.
Right. It's interesting having this conversation because while we're talking, I'm thinking of all the people I know that have, as I said, have had HIV for 40 years. And the topic never ever comes up. Once, honest to God, once they got, and for a lot of people, it really took fine tuning the meds. And now, I'm sure just in general, the meds are much more. I read about the new drugs they come out with. You have to take much less of them. They have less side effects and all of that. So for the people I know, this topic never comes up. It never ever comes up. It does come up though, with younger people now all the time, which is
Yeah.
interesting. I'm curious, do a lot of people in your community use PrEP, know about PrEP?
Right. Here in Mexico City, for example, yeah, a lot of people that it's not HIV positive, they're using PrEP. It's like the fashionable topic right now for HIV and for sexual education as well. Like everybody's getting PrEP. I think that's great as long as they don't take it as a way to say that HIV is bad. But in terms of prevention, it's beautiful and it allows people to live their sexuality freely, at least knowing that they're not getting HIV.
Right.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about HIV, besides there's the meds are much better now. We also have to talk about they will probably come out with and they're working on it. There's vaccinations. We've been hearing about it for a long time. It's still not here, but I have to believe we are close, and probably close with, you know, a med that you can take that will prevent you from getting HIV. And I believe that will be a big game changer. You know, a lot of what you talked about, having your value, having your worth, being stigmatized, right? We won't even be having that discussion because that won't exist. It, you know, I look for a time when it won't matter, right?
Right. I think that would be amazing if we have that prevention tool as well, that nobody else gets
Right.
HIV ever. But also knowing that HIV medication is so good now that we're getting older and older, and as people living with HIV. So basically, knowing that as much as it's important to prevent about HIV, it's important to take care of like elder people living with HIV, because right now, like you said, there's a lot of people that have been living with HIV for 40 years. So to make sure that they have the proper life quality as everybody else.
Right. And the proper support, right?
Yeah.
Now, you touched on it a little bit. Growing up, you always knew who you were.
Right. Since I was born, I knew that I was not a boy, and I went through a lot of like different like parts of it, like being gender fluid and all of that, or being like a really open like queer person, or just being like a really feminine gay person at the moment. But it all came to like me being a transgender woman, and so this is the best and the happier that I've ever been. And so yeah,
Well, it's
I think
your true self, right?
exactly.
You know what? You're very lucky that you can do this relatively young and not. I've met and interviewed so many people, you know, they spend their whole life not living the way they know they need to live. And I imagine it, right, ready to jump out of your skin when I think of it, because I have to explain this to people all the time. There's still a ton of people. I mean, in the States here, even in New York, a ton of people that don't understand why people transition. I have had so many conversations with people on that, and sometimes, you know what, I'm a good speaker, but I just can't get through to them. So I get as far as I can, and then I just have to let it go, because I find myself getting heated up and argumentative because I want to shake them and say, what is it that you just don't get? You know, right now, in the United States, we have so many little children. And I can imagine when you were a little child, you know, you just felt female. You knew it. You just felt it, lived it, and it's who you were. And
Yeah.
that is very challenging when I try and explain that to people, even in our community, Andy, they don't get it. A lot of
Right.
conversations I've had in our LGBTQ community don't understand supporting little children. In other words, you know, if they were identified at birth as male, but that child identifies as female, a supportive parent, right? You know, you wear your dress, you can play with dolls, all of that stuff that makes you feel good. The parent will be behind. But trying to explain that to people a lot of the time is really, really challenging. Have you ever been in that position?
Yeah, all the time. Like, thank you very much for you to have that conversation with people. I know it's really hard, but this 1 out of 10, you make someone understand. I don't think if they think that we would do this just for fun, that we would take all that hate and all of that mocking for being transgender just for fun. I don't understand why they think. We do it because it's the way we are, and
That
you know,
to grow
yeah,
out of it. You shouldn't support it because the child will, you know, it's a phase. I hate hearing that. It's a phase. And then we get into the whole thing here. And I wanted to ask you about this. Hormone blockers
yeah,
what is that like? I guess I have to just refer to Mexico City, because I think when you get out of Mexico City, you can probably forget about things like hormone blockers.
Right. So here, my treatment right now is the testosterone blockers. That is two like little pills that I take every day that block my testosterone.
Yeah.
And I put like this like spray on my arm that it is estrogen, and I have every 21 days I get the like the strong estrogen like shot, and so that's the way they do it with me. But like it's like slow process.
So,
Yeah.
it's very controversial. It's been brought up a lot, it's taking a kid that's 13, biological male identifies female, right? You don't want that child starting to grow a beard or, any of those characteristics that would be male identified when the person does not identify male, the person identifies female. And then it's up to the parent to get a pediatrician that will work
Right.
with hormone blockers. Is that something that's prevalent in Mexico City? I mean, can you get help with that if you've got a kid that's 12 or 13?
The law here in Mexico supports transgender children
They do.
to get blockers until they're 17 and they can decide like as an adult. But like you said, to prevent all of those changes
Right.
before their like development. So after 17, that you're legal to decide yourself. That's what they do here, and I think that's a great idea. Just the most important thing is that their parents support them in terms of referring to them as their gender and as their name. Yeah.
Do you also have, like, can a person get their driver's license changed in Mexico as well? The name on the driver's license and
Right.
the correct sex? Can they do that?
Right. Last week I got legally um, changed my name to Isis Santria Magdalena. So I'm very happy about that. And it only took me like 30 minutes to do it. Here is very easy, the access to do that. I'm not sure about the other states or other countries, but I'm working on making this manual for everybody to be easier for them to do it. And I'm gonna make also a list of the places that don't have it yet, so we can work together and everybody have their names and their genders correct.
I you know, you're doing really, really amazing work and really groundbreaking work, and Latin America, this is not easy to do, and so thank you for everything that you're doing and for putting yourself out there. Now, my God, the time is flying by. I need to actually know, I love your name, Isis Magdalena. It's such a beautiful name. Tell me what inspired that name.
So I'm a huge fan of the divine femininity and goddesses and all of that. So that's why I chose Isis as the Egyptian goddess. And Andrea, I used to be Andres before transitioning, so I just changed it a little bit
Yeah,
to
that was
keep my grandfather's name. And Magdalena, just because I also love the femininity and the power of that figure and how she was misunderstood in history.
it's
Mary Magdalene.
ask you that. I was just trying to figure, and I was going to start Googling, and I'm like, no, just ask on the show.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, and it's a
Yeah.
beautiful, powerful name. So, we're down to the wire here. What do you want people to know? What do you want to tell people?
So if you're living with HIV and you want to share your project through a webinar, we have grant opportunities for webinars, for scholarships for going to conferences, and for mini grants this year. So just go to Zero Project Lag on Instagram, follow us, and just contact me through my Instagram. It's right there, Isis Magdalena 99 on Instagram and Twitter, and I can like give you any help that you need if you're in Latin America, or if you need somebody to talk and chat and gossip, I'm here and whenever you need to.
Thank you. I mean, thank you so much for being here. It's a wonderful, generous offer. And the very last thing I always do, I always take pictures of me with my guests online. I just love the way it looks. So yes, I love that. A couple more. Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you to the Zero Project. And let me just wish you incredible well this year. I really hope that you get to talk in conferences in Latin America. Very, very much needed for the kind of work that you're doing.
Thank you, really, for inviting me. This was amazing. You're amazing and you're so beautiful, let me tell you.
Well, thank you. And I want to give a shout out to my amazing friend, Cindy Stein, first of all, for her support for this show, Triversity Talk, for her support of the Zero Project, and for just being such an incredible human being, really.
Thank you, Cindy. I love you.
She is. She's an incredible humanitarian. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight, and we'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.